everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the Sally Rooney Question. Now you might be asking, Jen, what? What do you mean by the Sally Rooney Question? Let me tell you. So, I've been around the bookternet and the bookstagram and the booktubes and the book twitters for a while now, and I have been seeing this kind of a theme when it comes to Sally Rooney's books. Sally Rooney is the author of Normal People and Conversations with Friends. These two books are of the literary genre, and they have been stirring the pot a little bit on the internet. So when it comes to most authors, at least in my opinion, when I read one book, I think I'm most definitely going to like the other ones that they've written, and I go and read them, and usually that's very true. When it comes to Sally Rooney though, a lot of people on the internet have been saying that if you like one of them, you won't like the other. And that to me was very intriguing. So my friend lent me her 2 copies of Conversations with Friends and Normal People, and I read them to discuss the question of, is this in fact true? When you read both of Sally Rooney's works, will you like one more than the other? Or will you like them both? Or will you hate them both? What kind of vibe am I getting from these books, you know? So not only am I going to discuss this is going to be mainly a book talk for both of these books because they both deserve some chatting on my channel, and I'm really interested to dive into these with you. Now, before I even get started, you guys deserve trigger warnings for both of these books. Now, both of these books deal with many different issues. So I will start with Conversations with Friends because that's the one that I read first. There are trigger warnings for cheating, self-harm, depression, alcoholism, medical issues, in particular endometriosis. There are depictions of blood and fainting spells. There's self-harm. I don't know if I said that already. And just in general, the mental illnesses talked about in this book and felt through this book can be detrimental. So I would look up, if you want more specific trigger warnings, definitely look them up for this book. And for Normal People, again, we have depression, we have anxiety, we have death of a parent, we have abuse, familial abuse, and we have relationship abuse, and I want to say that's all, but again, look them up if you need to, if you so desire, before you go into these books, because these books, I will say before I even get into the discussion, affected me so much that they both sent me into a depressive episode after finishing them. So, just so you know, that's a possibility. Let's just start this off with the fact that the Sally Rooney Question is in fact true. I loved one of these books and didn't like the other. I won't say I hated them. I will say that. And if you look at my ratings, they're actually pretty close together. So I gave this one, which is the first one that I read, Conversation with Friends, I gave this one 3 stars, and then I gave Normal People 4.5 stars. So in like numerical value, they're pretty close together. This one like 60%, this one 90%. Like it's about 30% difference. But I have reasons for both of this. So we're going to discuss this one first. So this one started out okay. It took me until about page 70 to really fall into the writing. So Sally Rooney has a really interesting writing style where she doesn't use quotation marks to denote where dialogue is. It doesn't take much to get used to it, I will say, but it on occasion can get a little confusing. You have to follow it. It does take a little bit to get used to because this one specifically is in first person, so Frances, our main character, the way that she talks and the way that she thinks kind of knits together really well, and it's a little bit difficult sometimes to pinpoint who's talking unless you have the line breaks where you have like just bits and pieces of dialogue that kind of sit underneath each other. Like they kind of sit underneath each other as they go down. But again, no quotation marks. And the style itself, I will say the writing style of this book, the best best way I can describe it is apathetic and detached, but also really steeped in reality. So it is interesting to get into, and thus took me about 70 pages to get into it, to get within the style, which is fine because it usually does take me at least 50 pages to 100 pages to get into a book and to decide if I like the writing style. Sally Rooney's writing style is very interesting, and it does go through both of these books. Both of these books have a very similar writing style, because that's just the way that Sally Rooney writes. So besides that, so I will say, I did do a little bit of a write-up on both of these. This is for normal conversations with friends, and then I did normal people on my phone. So I will be referencing it throughout the video, in case you wonder why I look down. So the good things about this book in particular are that this is a really interestingly well-crafted story. It is told with the recognizable story kind of pathways, and it has like a midpoint and a darkest moment, and it has character arcs and movement through it. However, what really made me mad was the ending of this book. Now, I should have prefaced this video, but there won't be any spoilers, so in case you really want to go into this, the only spoilers I would have given would be the trigger warnings, but those are very general, and you could go into a story knowing them, whatever. Trigger warnings are for people who need them, so it's fine. But yes, this was a very interestingly well-crafted story, and I will say that it really intrigued me to keep going. I have to say that I'm a person who has always said that I don't like character-driven stories. I need plot. I need something to move it through and whatever. I'm a plot-driven person. But upon reading these books, I've realized that I'm also the kind of person who needs a character to attach to, because characters and plot are synonymous and they work together. And now that I am like really studying and looking at the way stories are written, because I myself want to be a writer, I can tell that character and plot are not two separate beings. They are, but they work together synonymously to work and to progress and whatever. This book had an interesting plot, but it had absolutely abhorrent characters. I detested every single person in this. So, this story is about Frances and Bobby, two best friends. Frances used to date Bobby. Frances and Bobby used to date back in high school, and Frances and Bobby are both 21 years old at the beginning of the story. And they meet right at the beginning Melissa, who is this really up-and-coming jet-setter, like, photographer. She's older, she's into her 30s, and they meet her husband, Nick, who's also older. And so it's a very complicated, problematic friendship between these four people, and it's basically just a story of them being awful to each other. And Frances, our main character, she ends up in an affair with Nick, and that's what the story really revolves around. They have an affair together, and it's the ups and downs of that, basically. But yeah, as like I heard Emma from Drinking by My Shelf explain it, that it is literally just a book about four people being awful to each other. And that is very true. They are friends, they spend time together, they go on the vacation together to a beach house, and at this beach house stuff happens. Like, there's so many layers to the story, but it's just confusing as to why these four people are even together in the first place. Like, there's so many weird things about this. But so I will say, once I got past that 70-page mark, I got into the story a little bit more. I think it took until there's a beach scene in here that really reminds me of the movie Something Borrowed, which, like, the beach scene in Something Borrowed, which is really funny because that beach scene is like lighthearted but like underlying problematic, and this one is just problematic all the way through. But it reminded me of that, and it took until about that point for me to really get into it. But at times I was hate reading this. I was just so mad with the characters and their decisions that I was just reading it out of spite, and I just wanted to know what they would do to each other. And then by the end, I had a little bit of a reprieve. We had a little bit of an actually interesting story, like character arc at the end, and then the end happens and it kind of reverts, and it just makes me so mad. But that's besides the point. The characters in here, as I said, absolutely abhorrent. And I have proof of it because there's a dog in this story, and I trust dogs' opinions over anything. And how people treat animals in stories is a huge tell to what kind of person they are. And whenever these characters are in the same room as the dog, even the people who own the dog, Melissa and Nick, they don't interact with the dog at all. They ignore it completely. Like, I should have known. That first scene where they meet the dog, I was like, I should have known. These are all psychopaths because they don't even interact with the dog. We don't even get to know the dog's name throughout the entire thing because, like, nobody's like, oh my god, what a cute dog. Like, you know, natural human behavior is to pet the dog when it wants attention, right? So, there's that. And I think that's like what really should have clued me into how terrible these people are. But by the end of this book, I wanted to rage scream into the dying of the light. I just... yeah, terrible, terrible characters. So that is what gives you Conversation with Friends. I will say there's also bi representation in this book because Frances herself is bi. Bobby herself, I believe, is a lesbian. I don't remember if it's stated on page, but she's dated Frances and she tries to get with another person in the story who is identified as a woman, but I'm not exactly sure if she's on page represented as a lesbian or if it's just kind of understood. But yes, so there is representation in this, so there is that going for it. I hate cheating stories, so that also went into this. I don't like familial dramas. I don't like that kind of push and pull tension between characters when they are going behind other people's backs and lying, and it lends into my least favorite trope of all time of miscommunication. And I don't like cheating stories, so I think that might have also tainted my feel for this because it is literally just around the affair of these four people just being awful to each other. And I think that's one of the biggest things. So there's the cheating, there's the terrible characters, and I think because it's first person, you get Frances's mindset and her mental state throughout the entire book. And there were times when it felt like I was reading through slush and just pulling myself through mud because this book felt so detached and so apathetically depressed that it was just, it was hard to get through. And then there were times when it was easy to get through because Frances's mindset had been a little bit better and she wasn't as depressed. But she's kind of the worst in general. Like, she's just kind of the worst. And I think that's what really tainted my read of this. So that is Conversation with Friends. On that same note, Normal People. Let me pull up my phone. Normal People, I loved. Even though it had many of the same effects on me, I loved this book. And I'm not going to stop thinking about this book. I swear to God, I'm not going to think about this book. But there's this feeling that I get when I read both of her books and her work that I've read now that, like, they both feel very similar but different. They both feel very heavy. Like, it's thick when it lays on you. And with Conversation with Friends, it was an apathetic feeling. With this one, it was just like a sludge. Just, the only way I can explain it is that it felt like I was going through a depressive episode when I was reading this because it had that same laying on my consciousness that it feels like when I'm going through a depressive episode. Like, it's so weird how Sally Rooney's writing can have that effect. And I will say that both of her books felt extremely real. They felt like you were literally walking through the life with these characters, which I think really lends to her writing and really lends to why people like her so much or hate her a lot, because you're dealing with people who are very real and very flawed. And there's just so much you can say about this book. As I wrote in here as I was reading it, with Normal People, this heaviness that I was talking about, it was an ache at the familiarity on these pages, the way that these two characters went through things and had thoughts about stuff that I have had, and it's just a lot to read this because there's so many things in this book that are so familiar and so depressingly sad, but also really hopeful. There's really hopeful moments in here and really lovely moments in here. It's a lot. But right off the bat with Normal People, I absolutely loved the characters. I attached myself at the beginning to Marianne because she was more at the beginning. She's kind of a little bit more of a loner in school, so it starts when these two, Marianne and Connell, are in high school together, and Connell is very popular, he's loved in their town, whatever, everybody loves him, and then nobody likes Marianne. And Marianne and Connell know each other simply because Connell's mom works for Marianne's family. She like does the cleaning and all that kind of stuff because Marianne's family is very rich, and Connell's mom is a single mom and is a little bit poor on the poorer side. But Marianne is detested at school because she just has no time for anybody. Like, she's just like, no, like, I'm not going to play into the typical teenage experience just because that'll get me friends kind of thing. Like, she's very lonely, but in a way that's like she chose to be almost. At the beginning, like, it's just how she is, and then everybody else kind of pushed her away. But by the end, I was more attached to Connell because of what he goes through in his later life, or his university life, and how he feels and all of his thoughts through that. And then Marianne became a little bit of a distant piece to me. But these two characters meant so much right from like the first page. And they were both likable and relatable, and I think that's the biggest difference between these two books, is you have characters that you like or find relatable, at least in this one, and then in that one, abhorrent as hell. Like, you just don't like them at all. And I think that's the biggest difference, and that's what people probably hate or love about Sally Rooney's books. I honestly don't know anybody who doesn't like reading books about people who are relatable, like this one, but I know a lot of people who do enjoy reading books with unlikable characters. So in that way, I think people would like Conversations Friends with more than normal people. But anyways, let's keep going through my notes here. This is what I wrote. I was like, there's something about her books, I would say that they're a slice of life, but it's not quite that. It's like, it's just that feeling that, yes, this is a slice out of somebody's life, a moment out of their lives, and you follow, especially with this one, you follow them over a few years, and you catch up with them after like monthly interludes and whatever. But in Conversations with Friends, it is just a slice of time out of their life that you follow them on. So it's like that, but it's like you're going on a journey with them, and it just slowly crushes you. And by the end, you're just sitting there wishing there was an ounce of happiness instead of just an open question. But the funny thing is, both of these books exactly are slice of life, and the fact that there is no perfect ending in life. It is just this moment that you get, and then these characters live on. These people live on. It's just like real life. Which is one reason why I'm not the biggest fan of literary fiction all the time, because like it's just a lot of depressing with no actual happiness in it, but it's fine, whatever. That's a whole other discussion for a whole other day. I also said there's something really grandiose about her books, but at the same time something so minuscule that you just like, you're following these people and you're in their heads and they're just individuals, but it also speaks to like life as a whole, and like what they're doing in life, and like their choices and how that affects them, and how people, especially in this one, come back to each other, how their lives are like come into, like, it's just they're intertwined somehow in the universe, which is so wild to me that people can be intertwined like that. But it's true, because some people just seem to find themselves coming back to the same people all the time, or meeting them at different stages in their lives. This actually really reminded me of Love, Rosie and like One Day in December, but I've never read Love, Rosie or seen the movie, but I know the concept of it, and it's that like meeting, like it's going over many, many, many years and seeing these characters at each stage of their life and like their choices and how that affects them. Same with One Day in December. It goes over like, I want to say 5-10 years of these characters' lives, and it affects them like that. Like, it's seeing these characters in different settings. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, but there's just something grandiose and huge about Sally Rooney's books, but also so minuscule, because you get these just these moments and thoughts that flip by in your brain, and it's just, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It just hurts a lot. Because, as I say, like, these lives and these people on these pages are very real, and I think that's one of the best things about Sally Rooney's writing, is that the people she creates, these characters, they're people. You would be able to find these people on the street. And I think that's really truly amazing when it comes to fiction writing, is how real these characters can be. I read both these books, and I've already kind of discussed throughout these like 2 discussions as to why I think people would like either one more. I honestly don't know why people would like this one more than this one, but that's just because of my own bias and my own opinion, because I liked this one more than this one. I won't say I hated Conversations with Friends. It has stuck with me, and it's been in my brain for a long time since I've read it, and this one will do the same. And I don't know, I gave this one 3 stars, I gave this one 4.5. This one got a lower rating because of the terrible, awful characters who were so mean to each other, and the cheating, and it just wasn't my favorite thing to read. This one got a higher rating because it was just so poignant to me as a person, that I think that that's why I read it and I liked it so much. So if you think that you want to pick up Sally Rooney's writing, if you want to pick up both, I suggest you pick up the one that you think you're going to like least first. Because if you pick up the one that you're going to want to read more first, and then you go into the other one, you're going to be more disappointed. So I knew coming into this that this was about 4 people who were mean to each other, and this was about 2 people who were really relatable. That's all I knew going into this. And so I decided to pick up Conversations with Friends first, and then Normal People, because I knew that this one wasn't going to be as enjoyable for me as this one was. Just as an opinion on myself, and I know myself as a reader, which is very true, and I like that because I ended on a better note than I started on. If you like reading books that are about unlikable characters, definitely try Conversations with Friends. And if you like books about characters who are incredibly relatable, definitely try Normal People. Yeah, I think everybody should read a Sally Rooney piece in their life. They're short and they go very fast. You can definitely read them in a few hours if you apply yourself. So that is my analysis on Sally Rooney's 2 books. They both had similar effects on me after I finished reading. They both sent me into a depressive episode. Why? It's a great question. I think it's because of the writing style. It had me so deeply seeped in these feelings, this apathetic depression, and this just overall familiarity, sad ache that this one had, that they spat me out at the end with that same feeling. And it took me until the next morning to kind of get up and get out of it. So it was like a more extreme, shortened version of a book hangover for both of these. I will say, I ended up purchasing Normal People myself because I wanted to annotate this and sticky noted, as you can tell. This is my friend's copy. I also will say I felt strongly, incredibly strongly, about both sets of characters, just in completely different ways, as I have explained in this video. And I will say, I will recommend Normal People 9 times out of 10 more than Conversations with Friends, just because I know the people around me and the people who are looking for books want to relate to the characters more. If I know specifically that a person who asks for a book recommendation doesn't mind reading books about terrible people, I will recommend Conversations with Friends as well. In my opinion, Normal People is a more enjoyable story. I won't say it's a better story, because they both have the genius and the same flair that Sally Rooney has in her writing. They both have the excellently crafted stories. They're just so different in the ways that they follow completely different lives. And I think that's really the takeaway from this. I don't know. I'm just going to keep repeating myself if I stand here any longer. So let me know down below if you have read either of Sally Rooney's works, or if you are interested in either one more than the other, if you agree with me on my stance, and if you'll read them now that I've talked about them. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in another video soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.